thing to know about animal models, that in this animal kingdom, all animals are aging in similar way like humans. It's a conserved pathway. Animals that are aging have biology, and if they have biology, we probably can target this biology and see if it affects the rate of aging. And we've done that. In the lab, we took worms and mice, we took flies and rats and primates, and we treated them either by genetic manipulation or interaction with the environment, or drugs that some of them are even in human use. And we're successful in extending not only lifespan, but health span in those animals. We did it again and again. We have a body of clinical, preclinical work that suggests that we can do it. Let me give you this example. There is a very interesting chemical that is called rapamycin. And rapamycin is in use in people after an organ transplant. It's an immune modulator. Rapamycin affects a nutrient sensing pathway that's called mTOR. And the experiment that you see in the slide is an experiment that was done in 3 different labs using the same drug in different concentrations. And when you give rapamycin to mice, you see in the blue line are the control that didn't get the drug. But with increasing doses of drug, those animals live longer. There are studies now to give rapamycin to dogs and see if it affects their aging. There is even a study where they took elderly people and gave them rapamycin before immunizing them and showing that their immune response was better against the virus. So that's an example of a drug that's out there. Unfortunately, this drug is not yet safe for chronic use, so it needs much more development. So what can we do? What can we do in the meantime? How can we go from animal studies to human studies? Well, some of you might have heard about a drug that's called Metformin. So I have 2 pills of Metformin. That's all diabetic patients need in order to control their diabetes for a long while. I hope you can see it now. And people who take this drug, if they are not diabetes, it will prevent diabetes. But, and by the way, when you give it to animals, they live longer and they live healthier. So we know that from the biology of aging. But it's a drug that is safe, has been 60 years in use, is generic, so it's cheap, but it has curious side effects. One of the side effects is that people with diabetes, if they're on Metformin as compared to other drugs, they have 30% less cardiovascular disease. If they're on Metformin, they have 30% less cancer. If they're on Metformin, whether they are diabetics or not, they have less cognitive decline and less Alzheimer. And this is the data that really got to me. This is a study from the UK where they took 200,000 people, half of them are controlled in the red and black line, and watched their mortality. Now, the blue line is for a drug called sulfonylurea. The people with diabetes on sulfonylurea had higher mortality. We know that people with diabetes have higher mortality. But in the green line are the people with Metformin. And the people who use Metformin, it's not only that they had less mortality than the people with diabetes who are treated with other drugs, but they had less mortality than the control, significantly less mortality than the control. They had diabetes, they were more sick to begin with, and they were more obese to begin with, and yet they survived later. So that shows us that Metformin can be really a great tool in order to target aging. Why am I saying that Metformin is a tool? Well, first of all, we have to do the study and we have to do it right. And with the help of the American Federation of Aging Research, we launched a study that's called TAME, Targeting Aging with Metformin. And in this study, we're going to select elderly people and randomize them. 3,000 people, we randomize them to placebo and control. And what we're going to look at is the onset of diseases. Which diseases? We don't care. We're agnostic to the disease. Every disease will get a point. It's all about aging. So we are going to look at cardiovascular disease and diabetes and cancer and dementia and cognitive decline and death. And everybody gets a point. But we're going to show how metformin changes this rate of aging. And we're going to have some other secondary outcomes to really depict the functional decline of aging. We've seen those slides on the hallmark of aging. This is the European one, has 9 pillars. With Brexit, they're losing 2, I hear. And this is the American one that have 7. But please concentrate on the American one and the network in between. And I think this is very important. I'll give an example. I wondered what examples you were going to give. I'll give an example that you haven't heard yet. Ana Maria Cuervo at Einstein is an expert on proteostasis, or more correctly, she's an expert on autophagy. And autophagy is the garbage cleaning mechanism in our cells. It's actually a green energy garbage disposal mechanism. And Ana Maria Cuervo, with genetic methods and with drugs, have been able to increase the clearance of garbage in our cells. She prevented and cured Parkinson in models and Alzheimer in models because the neurons are really accumulating this beta protein, and they're really freaking out from this dimension. But the important point here is then when she does that, she affects also the stem cells, the metabolism, and the inflammation. And that's common to a lot of the drugs that we're testing. They're supposedly we're targeting one thing, but because of the connectivity, we're influencing other. We still want to have enough tools for everyone, but we can start making a lot of difference by starting even with one aspect of that. And I would summarize what we've done and what you've heard before, that healthy lifespan, and I want to say that it's healthy lifespan. What we're trying to achieve is health span. In my mind, longevity, with the commercial, you'll be healthier. The side effect, you'll have longevity. Can you pay for it, I think longevity is a side effect, but we can target health span, and we've targeted health span in many models. We can do it in nematodes and in flies and in mice and in rats and in monkeys, and we can do it by interaction with the environment or genetic manipulation or drugs. And really the most important thing, that some of those drugs are actually in human use. And I would say the following: since our maximal life expectancy, we think, is about 115, right? There's somebody who lived to be 122. But it's about 115, and since we die now before the age of 80, there's 35 years potential, without changing our body in any substantial way, that we could realize now and allow George to move on can we extend it below or can we make it better. But there's a way to move right now. I also should mention that the NIA had this intervention testing program, and it's just to show you some of those drugs that are given to animals, and the control in 3 different centers. And the animals that are kind of shifting to the right are those who are surviving longer. And there are few points to realize here. First of all, that a lot of those drugs are extending lifespan. On the bottom right, the combination of rapamycin and metformin has the world record in longevity of 24%, increase in health span and in lifespan, and much more that in health span. Also, you notice by the rapamycin, and there's an error there on the bottom middle, you can target aging later in life and still get an effect. It's never too late to target aging. I bet the senolytics that you heard about from the director is something that you target later in life because you need to have more senescent cells. And maybe some other intervention, actually like the one George mentioned, you have to start earlier in life, and we'll have to figure that out. But their example, let's figure out for a second, why are we afraid of aging? Now, Woody Allen says, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. But that's not really what we're afraid of. We're afraid of the diseases of aging. We're afraid of getting a disease and getting a treatment. Both the treatment is not so effective against the disease, but it has side effects. And then we get another disease and another treatment, and very soon we're accumulating 3 and more diseases with many treatments that have side effects and also interaction between them. This is really failing. What I want to show you in this figure is, look at all those diseases that are age-related diseases, and they come in different colors. And I want to show you the relationship between death from those diseases and age. And take the light blue line on top first. This is the death from cardiovascular disease according to age. The risk goes from a number 5 there to 5,000. The risk of dying from cardiovascular, the major risk for dying from cardiovascular disease is aging. Now, people tell you, hey, there's cholesterol, but cholesterol is a 3-fold risk. Aging is a 1,000-fold risk. But this is not only for heart disease. The next line there, the red line, is cancer. Okay, and it's parallel line. So the major risk for cancer, for any cancer, is aging also. And that makes you maybe understand that treating one disease at a time, the most that you can expect is to exchange one disease for another. You know, if you get a heart disease, if you get a myocardial infarction and you walk into the emergency room, you get a stent or you get a bypass. You know, those people that are now saved from local treatment to the heart, in 2-3 years, a lot of them are getting diabetes and cancer and Alzheimer's because we never treated or thought of treating their aging. Just one disease at a time. And that doesn't work so well. So how do we move from understanding this aging and this problem and trying to move on? So back to my centenarians, and there are 3 things I want to show you. The first thing is in this graph, which depicts really how many of those centenarians in our control are disease-free. In the beginning, if you see the green line, which is for the control, everybody is pretty much healthy. And then at a certain age, they're starting to be sick. And at age 80, most of them are sick. Very few people are not sick. But if you look at the blue line that is for centenarians, you see that it's all delayed. They're starting to get sick later. And at a later age, a lot of them don't have diseases. Wow, what a relief, right? We didn't want to find out that they get disease like everybody else and then they live with the disease for all those years. But they have 20 to 30 years that they don't have diseases. Now, you might say, okay, but after all, we learn about the interaction between the environment and aging, so maybe they're just doing what the doctors are telling us to do now. And the answer is no. Okay, 50% of them are overweight or obese. 50% of them are smoking. Less than 50% are doing even moderate exercise. I'm talking about walking and bicycling or work at home. So the story is really not their interaction with the environment, but in spite of that, how otherwise would you explain that Helen lived to be 110 when she's smoking for 90 years? So what did we discover in their genes? Well, we discovered clusters of mutations that changed the function of some proteins. Some of the proteins, for example, are important to lipid metabolism. So our centenarians have, and their families have, high levels of HDL cholesterol, it's the good cholesterol. And this is associated with some of the mutations that they have. Some of our centenarians have mutations, again, cluster of functional mutations in their growth hormones, which suggest actually that giving growth hormone to elderly, which is practiced sometimes in the United States, is really not safe. But above all, there are biotech companies like Cobar or pharmaceuticals like Merck that have taken some of my data and are developing drugs. But the drugs that are developing are targeting one disease and not only aging. So how can we move to target aging? So what are the challenges to translate our advance in understanding aging to humans? So this is the challenge. In every other disease, you find the biology and you have biotechs and pharmaceuticals and you develop drugs. And the drugs are targeting the disease. And you actually come back to the scientists and said, you know, we're running out of patent. Maybe there's another mechanism when maybe we'll do another drug, and everybody is happy with those diseases. For aging, the FDA doesn't have an indication to target aging. And we feel, and when I say we were a bunch of scientists, that we feel this is the one that's holding us most. And why is it holding us? Because if there's no indication, the healthcare providers do not pay for their clients. If they don't pay for their clients, then the pharmaceuticals are not going to do those better drugs, other drugs, because they have to have a business plan. So for us, the major obstacle has been the FDA. And we, against a bunch of scientists, found a way to deal with it. We took a drug by the name of Metformin that extends health span and lifespan in animals. We understand a lot of the biology of that. Metformin is a first line for type 2 diabetes. It's generic, very cheap drug. It's one of the cheapest drugs in the market.